Hi, this is Irv Shapiro of the Dr. Vax channel. And today I'm going to continue my quest for the ideal printer for someone new to 3D printing. Specifically, the ideal printer for someone who doesn't want to do any assembly. They want to take it out of a box and just use it. Over the last 3 years, I've reviewed a number of Monoprice 3D printers. Some that I've purchased, some that they provided me for free as review copies. Here on the desk are a range of Monoprice printers that are targeted as your first printer, either for a beginner or an enthusiast. The difference being, a beginner is someone who wants it to be an appliance, doesn't really want to mess with it. An enthusiast is likely to want to upgrade components, upgrade parts. They want to be able to do that easily. Now, on the desk here, you'll see printers that range from the Cadet over here. That's the gray printer that's really designed for brand new beginners. For what it's designed for, it works well, but it doesn't have a heated print bed. It's because of the shape and the enclosure, it's very hard to work on if anything goes wrong. So the Cadet is not my favorite printer. On the other hand, the Monoprice Select Mini, which I've owned for 3 years and I bought, is a great little printer. It's just reliable, it always works, it's very easy to work on. Over here we have an original Monoprice Delta Mini. Now, I had some trouble with that printer. I had trouble getting things to stick to the print surface. So when Monoprice reached out to me and asked me to do a review on the Delta version 2, I wasn't sure what I would find. Would I find a completely different printer? You can see here, they look almost identical. Or would I find a printer with just some cosmetic changes? Well, in fact, I found a very different printer. So stay tuned and let's learn something together. Okay, I've rearranged a bit so I can show you all of the features of the Monoprice Delta Mini version 2. And we're going to cover the printer itself, the firmware and user interface, the slicers available, and then we're going to look at quality by looking at a couple different prints. Now, before I get started, this is going to be probably one of multiple videos about this printer because as you're going to see, I really like it. I like it for the right user. And the right user is somebody brand new to 3D printing that doesn't need to print things very big. They're looking to print relatively small items and they don't want to do any assembly. And for that user, this is quite an interesting printer. So stay tuned to learn all of the details. If you want to see future videos about this and other 3D printers, please subscribe to the channel. Click on the bell to get notified about those future videos. Now, if you're one of my typical viewers, you might ask, why should I watch this video about an entry-level printer? And the reason is, this might be a great printer for your son or daughter, or your grandson or granddaughter, or a friend who keeps asking you, what is this 3D printing stuff, and can I actually make anything valuable, useful with it? This would be a great way to start. And part of the reason is that this printer is extremely portable. It's very, very easy to move around. It has a handle on it. It's relatively light. And so it's a good starter printer. It's also relatively inexpensive. It will be available at the end of towards the end of this month from Monoprice, directly on their website. And all Monoprice printers come with a money-back guarantee. I think it's 30 days. You'd have to check. But if you don't like it, you can just send it back. So for $180, you can get started with 3D printing. Now, you're probably going to have to spend another, I don't know, $20, $30, $40 on different filaments. So for under $250, you really can get started with this hobby. You can print things up to about 120 millimeters high, maybe a little bit more, and the side-to-side dimensions are 110 millimeters. It's not a square, it's a circle though. So the diameter is 110 millimeters. The print surface is not removable. There are little clips that hold it on, and you can disconnect those clips and lift this surface up, but there are wires attaching it down below. So that's just for maintenance purposes. In the corner, under each corner of this print bed, it's very, very interesting because there is a small switch. And the way this printer does print leveling, bed leveling, which is the same as the version 1 printer, is the print head actually presses down on the bed and triggers the switch. The difference is that in the version 1 printer, it really only checked these 3 spots. In this printer, it's able to check many spots and look at the overall results, creating a mesh. So the firmware that handles bed leveling is massively more sophisticated. That makes a big difference. I have not had a single print fail to stick to this print surface. Now, one of the other reasons prints stick to this print surface is Monoprice was very smart about setting the default for their slicers. The 2 they ship with this printer, there are actually 3 choices. We'll look at that in a moment. So that they always output a raft. A raft is this surface under your print that you peel off in order to use your print. Now, what's unique about rafts is very interesting. If you look at them closely, on the side that's on the print surface, there's a crosshatch. They have very good adhesion to the print surface, but they're relatively easy to peel up. The Delta Mini ships with this little plastic scraper for peeling them up. Don't bother with it. It doesn't work. You need to use either a metal paint scraper that has a sharp edge, or I like to actually use these razor blade paint scrapers. Now you have to keep it very flat. You don't want to cut the surface, but it's perfect for just getting the corners up. Then I use a regular paint scraper, or in that case, at that point, you could use the plastic one they ship to pry it up the rest of the way. The primary differences between this version and the prior version are that it has a full color touchscreen display. That's really nice. We're going to look at that in detail. On the back, it does have a power switch. The prior version did not. And it still has a USB connector and a power connector on the back. The SD card slot is on the front. Now, one thing that's really nice about this printer that you don't see in all entry-level printers is the SD card slot is really solid. It has a nice click when it goes in, and you don't need to use something to push the SD card in to get it back out. So it's really quite a solid printer. Now, if this is the first time you're turning on your printer, you're going to see this Monoprice logo displayed, and then it's going to ask you to select a language. So let's go through this together. I'm going to select English. I've read this before. It gives you some instructions. I'm going to select Next. And it's telling me to insert filament into the printer while it heats up the printer. So let me do that. Now, the one thing you have to do is clip this bracket onto the side of the printer. So let me do that here. And I'm going to put a roll of filament on here. And now I'm going to take and cut this filament off at a sharp angle, just like that. And it's very easy to load the filament into this printer, which makes it a very good printer for someone first getting started. So I'm pressing the extruder lever in and pushing the filament until it hits the hot end here. And in a moment, we should see some filament coming out here of the hot end. Here we go. Now, I don't know how well you can see that. Perhaps we'll show it to you on the close-up camera. And that was really easy. A lot of 3D printers designed as first printers, even like the Ender 3 version 2, for some reason it's just hard to get the filament into the Bowden tube. The Bowden tube is this white tube that connects to the extruder. On this printer it's quite easy. It says please clean the extruder filament. I'm going to pull that off and click next. Now it is going to print a sample print. It is very important, just a note, you had to put the SD card in before you powered on the printer. This printer does seem to have a bug that if you put in the SD card after you power on the printer, it doesn't always recognize it. So make sure you had the SD card in, and it's going to print a little cat ring. And what you see it doing now is checking the level of the bed. If we look at the front display, you'll see it's heating up both the bed and the extruder. It gives us an estimate of the amount of time it'll take to print this part, and it has a picture of the part. Now, that's a feature you only get if you're using one of the proprietary or semi-proprietary slicers from Monoprice. Either WiiBuilder, which we'll look at together, or Polyprint. Polyprint or Poloprint is a app that you can use on an iOS or Android phone. I found it really buggy. I wouldn't recommend even bothering with it. Instead, as we'll see, I'm going to recommend you use either WiiBuilder or Cura, both that were on my SD card for this printer. Okay, while this is printing, I'm going to show you some features available on this printer that you don't often see on a printer that sells for less than $200. The first is you can vary settings for the print while the print is running. So if I click on settings here, I could change the filament. Let's say I was running out of filament or I wanted to change colors. I can click on temperature and I can adjust the temperature of the print while it's printing. I can click on speed and either speed it up or slow it down. Now, if I'm not worried about quality, I could speed it up pretty dramatically. And I'm going to speed this up now just to show you what that looks like, because it's really interesting to watch this printer print at a very high speed. So let's put it at 400%. And you can see this printer is really moving now. Okay, now I'm going to pause the print. I'm going to click on pause. And then I could go back to settings, change the filament, go to a different color. In this case, I'm going to go back and say I want to cancel the print. Under settings, we'll see we can look at info, which will tell us what firmware, other information about this. You can change the language. I want to go to Wi-Fi. Under the Wi-Fi setting, if you haven't already selected an access point, it will give you the option of selecting an access point and then tapping in your password. It works great. It worked perfectly the first time. And then it will display an IP address, the address of this device. Mine's 10.0.1.66. You'll need that because that'll help you connect to the printer from WiiBuilder, and we'll see that in a moment. Now if I go to next, you can turn on or off the ability to do a diagnostic every time you run your printer. That's under post. I recommend you turn it on. You can recover from a power loss. That says look on the SD card for a file and load it to restart a print. So this is full power loss recovery. The printer has a nice set of diagnostics that you can run. Before you run the diagnostics, though, you have to take the filament out because it's going to actually turn the extruder as part of the diagnostics. It will test each component and ask you to verify they're working. It has the ability to save all the settings you've put into the printer either through a G-code terminal or through this user interface. You can upgrade the firmware. Now, you don't always see that on entry-level printers. This has upgradable firmware, and then there's contact information for Monoprice. Under Prepare, you can change the filament, set the temperature, move the print head around. Delta Calibrate is really important. I believe that's the reason this printer is so much better than the version 1. Because instead of just doing a mesh test at 3 points, the Delta Calibrate checks a variety of points on the print surface. It does it multiple times. It averages all those numbers together, and then it saves that to your printer. So if you're having trouble with print sticking or with layer shifts or print quality, do a Delta Calibrate. Z offset lets you move the nozzle closer or further from the print surface for the first layer if you're having trouble with print sticking. All of these capabilities are unusual for a printer at this price point, but more unusual is how easy they are to use. In order to start a print, you just select print. You select the print you want to start. If the print was produced via WiiBuilder, you'll actually see an image on the screen. So that's a really nice feature. There are some disadvantages though to WiiBuilder versus Cura, and we'll talk about those in a moment. Now, let's look at the slicers that are included. So I'm going to do this initially on a Microsoft Surface Go. The Surface Go is a relatively slow computer, but I'm generally a Mac guy, but the Go is a really nice little laptop. It's a cross between a tablet and a laptop, so I use it as my travel computer. Start with WiiBuilder, WiiBuilder. It's actually WiiBuilder 2. So I'm going to start that. You'll see a Monoprice logo. Now that Monoprice logo is quite interesting. When I look at this printer, it physically looks like a printer manufactured by a company called Mylan. That's an OEM manufacturer in China. They make the Select Mini, they made the original Delta, and they make some other printers for Monoprice. What's noticeable is all of their printers are made of pretty heavy-duty sheet metal. That seems to be their approach. On the other hand, WiiBuilder 2 looks like the software that came with my Ultimate 2, which is made by a manufacturer called WiiDo. So it seems at this point, Monoprice has evolved from someone who puts a label on someone else's printer to a true integrator of components, which I think bodes well for their future. Let's take a look at WiiBuilder 2.1.2. So I'm going to click on the file folder here, and I'll load a Benchy STL model. And you'll see it takes just a little bit of time. Once again, a very slow machine. The visual representation is actually quite nice. The scroll wheel works well. I can press the scroll wheel down and move around. I can use the right mouse button to rotate. So far, very, very nice. Now I can go ahead and slice the model. And it gives me a dialog while it's slicing the model. And it's reasonably fast. Now once it's sliced, I can click on this button here and see the sliced copy. And the visual representation here is okay. It's not beautiful, but it's sufficient to get an idea of how it's sliced. Now what's really special about this slicer is this Wi-Fi button. If I click on the Wi-Fi button over here, I type in the IP address that's from the front panel and click on Connect, I'm now connected to this printer. I could move the Z axis down a little bit. I could say Home All. Very interesting, but that's not the most interesting. The most interesting is that there's a button here that says Upload. If I click on Upload, it's going to transmit this sliced file, the G code, to the printer. There's no cable here, all completely over Wi-Fi. Now, Polo Print does allow you to do that from an app, but as I said, I couldn't get it to work reliably. So I've been using WiiBuilder for this capability. Now, another nice capability is even if you slice your model with Cura, you can load the model into WiiBuilder and then still transmit it over Wi-Fi. And we'll see why that's important in a moment. Once it's over on the printer, you can see if we look at the front of the printer now, you'll see the 3D Benchy image on the screen. And it's going to check bed level and then begin this print. Now I'm going to actually cancel this print. But let's go back over here and look at some of the options. So if you click on the slicer gear option over here, you'll see the standard slicer options available. And you'll notice here the default is to use a raft. Once again, that's a really good choice. It ensures your prints will stick in this printer, and the cross pattern on the bottom makes them easy to get up. If I click on Advanced, you'll see a whole bunch of features that look familiar. As an example, when I go to travel, it says combing mode. Well, there's only one slicer I know that uses the term combing mode, and that's Cura. So it's pretty clear that the underlying engine used by this slicer is the open source Cura engine, and we can't really tell what version. Other features of the slicer are the standard capabilities to scale a model, move a model, to add supports. This does have pretty good capabilities for supports. And it does also have the ability to connect over a serial connection. Now, if you're connected over a serial connection, it gives you the ability to send custom G-code to the printer, which means you can use this as a terminal for fine-tuning your printer parameters. Okay, now, why am I not using this slicer all of the time? Well, they also ship a copy of Cura with files for both a Mac and a PC. I'm generally a Mac guy, so for one reason, I'd like to use it on my Mac. Unfortunately, you lose the Wi-Fi capability if you're only using Cura. And so the Wi-Fi capability right now is available only from the smartphone app, and I couldn't get that to work reliably, or from WiiBuilder, which worked quite well. The other reason to use Cura is print quality. So let's go to print quality now. I'm going to turn this off so that we can hear a little bit better. So you'll see here a whole bunch of calibration cats. Now, the first calibration cats that I printed by loading them into WiiBuilder and printing them. And the overall print was pretty good. I'll show you a close-up of this, but the overhangs were terrible. So I tried some experiments. I tried lowering the temperature. Didn't really make it better. So then I loaded the version of Cura for Windows onto this Surface Go, and I printed a calibration cat, and it really was much better. The overhangs weren't perfect, but it was really pretty good. Now, one of the challenges with this printer is, I'm going to unplug it here so you can see this better, is it has this one puny fan. This is it. And that fan has a fan duct down here. It just doesn't push enough air to do overhangs well. So I wanted to figure out why Cura was doing a better job than WiiBuilder. So I thought I'd spend some time using Cura on my Mac. Unfortunately, the Mac version of Cura that was on the SD card didn't work for me. Now, that won't be a problem long-term probably, because once these ships, you'll be able to go to the website, the Monoprice website, and download it. So I thought I'd just copy the parameters over manually. So I did that, and here's what I found. The key parameter that improved the overhangs was minimum layer time. Interestingly enough, it's set to 5 seconds in Cura on the Windows version that I loaded for this printer. That's a long time. In addition, coasting was turned off. So those are two parameters I saw different. It printed relatively slow. The temperature was about the same between WiiBuilder and Cura, but Cura did a much better job with overhangs. In fact, I printed a number of other things to test this printer. One was this set of rings that have relatively close tolerances, and they printed really well on this printer. This toy works perfectly. Then in Cura using vase mode, I printed this vase and it's absolutely beautiful. This is a beautiful vase. So for prints that don't have overhangs, the print quality in this printer is quite good. If you have a lot of overhangs where cooling is going to be an issue, this is probably not the optimal printer for you. Okay, now that we've looked at the printer, we've looked at the slicers, we've looked at the firmware, we've done some sample prints, what's my conclusion? Is this the right printer for somebody starting in 3D printing? First, the things I really like. The firmware, the user interface, the software in this printer is outstanding. It's the easiest to use of any printer I've used. Big plus for someone new to 3D printing. The setup wizard, very good. Wi-Fi support, excellent. A limitation of Wi-Fi support is you really have to use the WiiBuilder slicer, which is okay, but missing a couple features you need because of the weak fan on this printer. Negatives. The weak fan is the first and primary negative on this printer. In addition, it would be really nice if WiiBuilder was updated to a higher back end of Cura. I assume that Cura available from Monoprice will be available for both Macs and PCs. I used the version for a PC for Windows, and it produced very good prints. So if you're looking for optimal print quality, you probably want to go with Cura. If you're looking for ease of use, which will be just fine for a lot of people, WiiBuilder might be much easier to use. It's a simpler way to get started, and you don't have to save things to an SD card and move them to the printer. In terms of the mechanical aspects of the printer, it's basically pretty much the same as the original V1 printer. What that highlights is the importance of the firmware. The firmware in any 3D printer is absolutely critical. Now, because of the bootloader in this printer, this is also an excellent enthusiast printer because you might be able to load Marlin on this printer because it has a built-in bootloader. As I mentioned, the components on this printer are very easy to get to. As an example, you can tighten the belt with Allen screws right on the top of the printer. So it's a very usable printer, a very workable printer. I've opened it up. You'll see some pictures here. It's tight, it's well engineered. The components look really solid. So overall, I give this a strong thumbs up. This is a printer I can recommend, assuming this print volume, which is small, will work for you. Well, folks, I hope you enjoyed this video. I really enjoyed working with this printer, and I'll be coming out with a Your First 3D Printer video about how to get started with 3D printing if you know nothing, and I'm going to use this 3D printer as my printer for that video because it's so easy to use. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed this, subscribe, give me a thumbs up. Go to forum.drvax.com to share thoughts about this video and others. Thanks again. Have a great day. Let's continue to learn things together.